Well, Emily, this PowerPoint is made especially for you. So enjoy, made with love from two of your Genesis board members. Um, I'm just going to scroll through like this. That's a little bit easier for me to see. So, Emily, I'm Emily. I know we've been acquainted before, but I'm a 2009 graduate. And as you know, currently working as an assistant professor in PA education here at the University of Dubuque.
Yep. And I don't think we've met before, Emily, but my name is Shayla. I'm a 2016 grad, and I also did the PGY1 community pharmacy residency. And so currently I'm the clinical pharmacy coordinator, specifically in ambulatory care at Broadlawns Medical Center, which is a hospital or health system in Des Moines, specifically working with underserved and vulnerable populations.
So the purpose of our SuccessRx meeting tonight is to talk about the difference between learning versus cramming. Obviously, you've probably felt the overwhelming trying to pack all of this information into your brain, the kind of drinking out of a fire hose type sensation. So I think everybody kind of feels that way. We've all probably crammed at some point in our collegiate career, especially in undergrad. And so it's just kind of a natural progression to maybe continue that on in pharmacy school. When you think about the difference between learning and cramming, learning we want to think of as acquiring new knowledge and hopefully holding on to that knowledge over the long term. Cramming obviously is we memorize a whole bunch of information in a short period of time, and then we take the exam, pass the exam, and all of that information goes away. So from kind of a neuroscience perspective, we know that effective learning strategies activate parts of our brain that actually are involved with memory formation and emotional processing. Cramming, we certainly don't get that same effect. So, Emily, it's just you on the hot seat here. Why do we cram?
Lack of time. Weeks get busy and you find yourself on the weekend and exams on Monday. I think, at least for me, that is definitely the position that I get in sometimes, or ineffective studying throughout the week, and then getting to the weekend realizing that I don't actually know as much as I thought I did, and then having to learn it in a couple of days.
Yeah, I think, for me in undergrad, part of it was maybe a lack of interest in the material. Obviously, in farm school, hopefully we're interested in the material. But yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to poor time management. Obviously, the problem with cramming is it's not an effective way to learn. It certainly stresses us out, which makes learning even more difficult. We don't learn well when our brains are stressed. And oftentimes, obviously, we sacrifice sleep in order to cram. Shayla, Tom, anything else to add there?
Yeah, I think when you mentioned not having an interest in the material, but also not seeing a long-term point for learning the material as well, I feel like it might be a little bit harder to retain because we can't, imagine down the road, okay, why exactly do I need this? Well, let me just learn it now so I can forget it later. Hopefully that's not happening as much in pharmacy school, but I think it can make it a little bit more difficult to remember things long term.
I think my approach was much different during school. I was super guilty of cramming all throughout school. But then when it came to the NAPLEX and MPJE, I think my approach was a lot different because I knew it was like the ultimate end goal. I had more time to study for it. Like I said, I was a crammer. I mean, I think scheduling had a lot to do with it too. It was like 3 or 4 tests in one week, and you're just looking to get through and you're not really digesting the material. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, we're over onto the next thing, dump it out of my brain. So that was kind of my approach.
Yeah. And, thinking about, why is effective learning so important for us? Obviously, Emily, you're feeling this a lot right now is you obviously want to be prepared for your clinical rotations. You've invested all of this time and resources into your education. And you obviously want to be able to showcase that in clinical rotations. And, then the next step is kind of crossing that next hurdle of passing the NAPLEX and the MPJE. I'm guessing the question we got beforehand came from you. So I think now might be a good time to maybe talk about that. The question was tips for NAPLEX studying during rotations.
Mm-hmm. I can start with this one if you'd like.
Defer to Shayla or Tom, who've taken the NAPLEX more recently than me.
I'm learning it wasn't as recent as I would like to think about it. One thing I tried to do during rotations is whatever the main topics I was learning in that rotation, I would try to study that specifically. So that way I could come back to my rotation and ask questions about whatever I had in RX prep or maybe concepts that I wasn't quite understanding. I would repetitively go over top 200 drugs, generic brand name, and then math for sure to make sure we got all of those down, and then biostats as well. So those are concepts that you can do throughout your rotation, especially because you'll be doing journal clubs, case presentations. So that's information that'll keep coming again and again. But specifically during rotations, if, I knew I was going to have a lot of projects during that time, I would just try to stick with those topics that I could also bring into, my 8 to 5 or whatever time the day was for rotations.
And for me, I really utilized the recycled test questions. That was like very key for me the 3 or 4 weeks leading up, just so that I could get a sense of what types of questions they're going to be and how they're phrased and framed. Because I didn't know what they were going to look like. Like you take a million tests throughout school, but you don't know how formal the NAPLEX is going to be and how the wording is going to look like. And I think that's what really helped me out. Yeah, that was that. The recycle tests were worth paying for, and I don't think they were incredibly expensive, if I recall. But I used the year prior those questions, and it was super helpful.
Yeah, thinking back to what I did, one of the things I agree with Shayla, is, I tried to study topics that were consistent with what I was learning on my rotations, but every step along the way, I did brand generic and I did math problems just because I needed that repetition to keep that skill up. So I feel like that really helped me. And I also hit topics really hard that I didn't have any clinical rotations about. So like hematology, oncology, HIV drugs, that just wasn't part of what I got exposure to. So I studied that information really intensely. And I could definitely tell on the boards that definitely helped me, because I would have pretty much been clueless on a lot of that stuff. The only other thing, and I don't recall with RX prep, but, going through question banks that will not only tell you what you got right, but provide an explanation of why your answer is wrong. I think that's really helpful too, because then you can kind of understand where your knowledge gaps are and figure out, okay, why did I select that question wrong? What didn't I understand about the way the question was being asked? So just kind of becoming a better test taker from that perspective can be helpful too.
I definitely agree with that too, because now I remember as I was going through those test bank questions, after I maybe did it once or twice, each answer I would try to explain why it was right and why it was wrong before I answered it, and then making sure that, I got it right. So that, I think that was very helpful too.
Emily, what are you using right now in terms of like online resources?
To review, nothing, just like class notes. Pretty much. I know people really like the RX prep book. That's some advice that I got, was to get that and then kind of do what you were saying, and study the topic that you're doing in your rotation as much as you can. One of the hot topics right now, for at least kind of a ranking rotations, is when to take your bye week or when to preference your bye. Did any of you preference your bye for cycle like 8 or 9 to help study for the NAPLEX, or just studied throughout your rotation and found that okay?
I took my bye, I think it was second because it was my birthday. So maybe don't listen to me. But I did preference my community rotation last because I had been working throughout school. So I knew that one might be not as difficult clinically for me. And then when I got there, I actually specifically asked them, like, hey, can I focus on counseling, MTM? And then do you mind, like, if there's downtime or something, if I study? And it was a great site. And they were like, absolutely, part of our job is to help you pass. So they would actually let me get in, an hour or so plus a day to help study. And then I just helped with all of their more clinical things versus just like filling or something like that.
I think my buy was the second week or second cycle too. I don't really recall or remember, but I took my buy. I didn't put a preference in for my buy, so I just took it whenever it came to me. I was working throughout school. Again, I was pretty hard-headed, I'll be honest about it, throughout the whole process. But once graduation came, I did spend all of May and June working towards that NAPLEX. So, I mean, just like Shayla said, it just work with your preceptors. I think they're going to be really honest with you too, and give you guidance. For me, it wasn't anything specific. So
Yeah, I had my bye week or the first rotation and I went on vacation. I did not use that time wisely at all, but similar to what Tom said, as soon as graduation hit, I worked very little and pretty much just studied for the remainder of May and pretty much all of June. I took my boards and the MPJE at the end of June. So just had a really consistent regimen of studying pretty much for 7 or 8 weeks straight and felt pretty confident about that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just to share a couple of study tips that I've found have helped me personally, is just organization and scheduling. I'm kind of in the category of a geriatric millennial. So I use my phone a little bit, but I'm super old school. My mom gets me these notepads at the Dollar Tree and I'm a total list maker. I carry my Sharpie everywhere. So that works really well for me. And going along with the bottom bullet point there, I get so much satisfaction from crossing things off my list. So that really just helps keep me organized. Phones, they're obviously a huge distraction. So trying to avoid things like that and avoid procrastinating, obviously, as we talked about, that can lead to cramming, which is not an effective way to learn. And then there's lots of evidence that shows that spaced repetition does improve long-term memory. So to your question about, how to study for the NAPLEX, kind of going back to concepts repeatedly over the course of your clinical year might be helpful, especially for those topics that maybe you struggle with a little bit more. We kind of talked about, testing yourself and understanding, okay, why did I get this question wrong? What can I learn from that? I know our students use Osmosis. Have you ever used Osmosis? So it's an online platform. You have to pay for it, but it's a review of physiology, anatomy, lots of different things. And they have questions at the end of each video that actually will give you the rationale for right versus wrong answer. So that's really helpful. Obviously, while you're still a student, taking advantage of office hours that professors might have. Now working in education myself, I think one of the biggest things that students struggle with when they don't understand something is just coming in and saying, I don't understand this, but kind of being prepared going into that conversation and saying, this is what I get, but this is kind of where I start to get confused, and really being focused and clear with what you don't understand. I think that just makes the conversation go a little bit better. I don't know, Shayla or Tom, anything to add there?
Yeah, absolutely. I was not good at taking questions to office hours until maybe like junior year of undergrad, and I still didn't even do it that much. I got a little bit better during pharmacy school, but being on the other side, my first job after residency was teaching, and so just to echo Emily V, when students would come and they're like, "Well, I don't understand this." Okay, well, which part don't you understand? So do put in a little bit of the work, but I think if you're able to parse out the specific concepts or issues that you're having problems with, it makes it easier for the professor to be able to explain it to you in a way that you need, versus just kind of giving a blanket explanation. And then maybe you're not truly, utilizing both of your time wisely in those office hours.
Again, I was super opposite of everyone. I was really unorganized. I was really just focused on, okay, what do I have to get done today rather than what do I have to get done for the week or the month or the semester. So having things planned out way ahead of time would be really good. Sorry, my dog is like all over me right now. And the self-care thing, again, don't beat yourself up too much with work. There's plenty of time in the future to work and make money. The taking questions to office hours, I thought that was really good, Emily, because I was terrible at that. Whenever I was the type of person that was like, if I needed help, I would go to YouTube first and try to figure it out and then ask my friends. I was too timid to go to the professors to ask for help. And I'm also a very big advocate for and proponent for using that as an opportunity for them to get to know you and them, you to get to know them. Because it can serve as a letter of rec later on down the road, a connection to a job, anything like that. So always take those opportunities to meet your professors too. So
Yeah, it's a really good point. So we thought we would share some what I wish I would have known when I was in your spot, Emily. To kind of echo what Tom said, I think I can recall going to office hours once in undergrad and maybe once in farm school. I was just not good at approaching professors. I don't know why. But it's certainly okay not to understand something. The level of what you're learning is very complex, and, definitely feel okay asking for help. And why would you not? You have all of these experts that are in education, hopefully for the right reason, that want to help you. Secondly, I think it's really easy to avoid things that we don't like or we don't understand. So, recognizing topics that you struggle with and, trying to focus on those, especially as you're preparing for the NAPLEX. The third bullet point here, I'm a victim of this. In farm school, we called it drug lit, like evidence-based medicine, biostats. I was like, I don't need to know this. I'm going to be a community pharmacist. I want to learn about drugs. This is going to have no relevance to my life. Fast forward 15 years, here I am in education, teaching our students about evidence-based medicine and helping them with their capstone project. So totally came back to bite me in the butt. So stuff you're learning now might not seem relevant or pertinent to what you're going to do in the future, but it probably will be. And then probably most importantly, do not compare yourself to other students. Comparison is the greatest thief of joy. Your journey is not the same as anyone else's. You have different strengths, different weaknesses. Embrace both, and, don't try to get distracted by, what other people are doing, which can be challenging, certainly. And then lastly, just remember to take breaks. I was the student that just put my head down and I would study for like 9 hours at a crack and I wouldn't get up and move around. So just trying to take breaks, study for an hour, get up and walk around for 10 or 15 minutes. And I think that really just helps refocus.
Yeah, and a lot of mine are fairly similar to Emily's too. I just wanted to reiterate, don't compare yourself to other people. Just like she said, everyone has a different journey, like before pharmacy school, during pharmacy school. I put this picture in here because I feel like it encapsulates a lot of my other tips. So this was me and my friends at the beginning of P3 year, and I was 5 months pregnant. Love my daughter now. Wouldn't necessarily recommend doing that in pharmacy school unless you want to, totally up to you. But my tribe of people that I met and had through pharmacy school, I feel like we really helped carry each other because we were there as a support team. So helping other people also helps you, whether that's a study group, they understand something that you necessarily might not. When we were studying, we would kind of ask each other questions, like pretending we were the professors or what we thought the professors might ask at that time, just so that we could, figure out different ways to view concepts or view questions so that when it was a test time and we were all by ourselves, we could kind of echo those sentiments while we were taking the exams. I put it's okay to move back to move forward. So especially with pharmacy school, as you go, through the rest of P3 year and P4 year, you are going to have to review concepts versus I feel like maybe, at P1 or P2 year, or definitely back in undergrad, you study for the test and then you're done. And you don't really have to go back. You can if you're an awesome student. I was not always. So I might not, but I think as you continue to move forward and you're certainly, becoming a practitioner, you're studying for your exams, anything else in the future, you do need to kind of revisit some of those basic concepts just sometimes just to make sure you're heading in the right direction. And then I also put just enjoying the small wins. There was lots of tests where I may not necessarily have gotten an A, may not have gotten a B, but I worked really hard. I knew that I had grown. And so it's okay to celebrate those too, especially with the people that are helping you get there.
Tom, anything you wish you would have known?
I really like the small wins thing because it was like when you're in the moment, you're always just thinking, man, I could have done this, it could have gone this way if I would have answered C instead of B, whatever it was, right? But yeah, enjoy the small wins. And Emily, I think that's so funny. I always tell people the druglet thing is the most underrated class that we had. And it's a shame that it was only one semester because I never thought I would use it ever again either. And literally that's all I do. We have journal clubs literally every week. We're trying to understand and criticize every study that comes in and how we can optimize certain trials. So
I just loved how we both started laughing.
Yeah, it's so true. It is so true. But yeah, those are my tidbits. I do have to jump off. Thanks guys. Emily, Noah, feel free to follow up with me or any of us. I'm always happy to talk. So thanks guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Continuing on what I wish I would have known, in undergrad, I was rewrite my notes 10 times, and then I could just regurgitate that for organic chem or biochemistry. It really wasn't probably until I got into pharmacy school that I really kind of learned how I learned best. I really learned great from mnemonics and acronyms. It just makes things stick. It's obviously reflected a little bit in my teaching style now. G-Pac-Man, the CYP inhibitors, P-Crabs, the CYP inducers, that, has stuck in my head forever. And it's how I teach that content. So took me a while to figure that out, but that's, one thing that certainly works well for me.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Find what works for you and stick with it. Like I said, I did not really know my style in undergrad, and it took me probably until P2 year to figure it out. So while I was in school, personally, I would, take my notes during class. I had apps that would record the audio and it would actually match up with my notes. So I could go back later and type on whatever I had annotated, and then it would start that recording. And then once I got home, I would actually print that out and then listen to it again so I could have that repetition, but then figure out, okay, what did I not understand in class? I put a bunch of question marks here. Why did I do that? So it just gave me an opportunity to review that in multiple different ways. And then just like we mentioned, utilize all of your resources. So whether that's professors and office hours, Now there's podcasts, there's videos, looking at guidelines maybe to see, what are practitioners actually doing versus what I'm learning and how can that maybe connect, especially as you're going into your P4 year. I think there's just so many options now. There's so many varieties because people are realizing that everybody does study differently, that there's really no reason to say, I didn't really, I didn't have the time or I wasn't able to do something, because I think there's multiple options for you to be able to learn the material.
Just out of curiosity, hi Noah too. Sorry, didn't see you when you popped on there. Do you use any besides podcasts, do you follow any like Twitter or Instagram pages that you found to be helpful?
I don't really do Twitter, Instagram. I've been following kind of residency pages sometimes because that's what I'm looking at now. But for studying, I never did that, to be honest.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not a big Twitter person either. I do follow a couple pharmacists on Instagram. I know one, she's based out of the UK, so I always am a little hesitant to use like the study guides that she makes just because there's a little bit of a difference, but some of the things that she has are really good. I can't remember her username at the moment, but otherwise podcasts, not necessarily like pharmacy, but I have one that one of my preceptors over the summer recommended that was like 5 minutes, which has been really helpful. Just like little review topics.
Yeah, that's the hard thing about, Twitter, Instagram. It's hard to sometimes know what's credible and what's not, and if it's vetted or not. But there's a couple Twitter pages, like a NAPLEX study guide one that I follow, just because it's like I can look at it. It takes me 2 seconds to read through it, and it's like, oh, yeah, I didn't remember that. Or it's just a quick way to kind of test yourself. So I'll try to look it up and send it your way. Maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not, but just something quick that you can do every day as a quick review might be kind of helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I could use some Instagram things to follow.
You could use some.
Totally.
Well, I'm into like sourdough bread baking and bird watching now, but I'll try to funnel the pharmacy ones your way, Noah.
Yeah, for like NAPLEX, MPJE. That's what I'm prepping for too.
Okay. Are you P4?
Yes.
Okay.
Good to know. Yeah, I'll jot that down. I'll see if I can comb through mine, and if I have any to suggest, I'll send them your way. Just a few more things to finish up here. Two things I've learned recently that have really given me good perspective on how to prioritize. I took a class on education this past year, and they talked about two things. One was the one thing. So what's the one thing I need to get done today that's going to help me be more productive or successful tomorrow? Anybody can do one thing, right? So it kind of takes that pressure, that overwhelming feeling away. Like, okay, if I get this one thing done, it's going to make my tomorrow a lot easier. And then the second thing was done by one, really simple. What's the one thing I can do? And I can get it done by 1 o'clock today. So just kind of simple things that kind of take away some of that overwhelming, I have so much stuff to do, I don't know where to start. Those two things have really kind of helped me out recently.
And so to wrap things up, we kind of wanted this to be, an interactive discussion, which it has been. So that's really good. And so just looking at how your study habits have changed, from undergrad through pharmacy school. So now that we're switching it up a little bit, Emily, if you want to talk about, some of the ways that you've changed your study habits from maybe like beginning pharmacy school to where you now are as a P3. And then I think, Noah, you said you're a P4. So maybe talking with Emily about some ways that you've had to change your study habits or things that you've picked up during your first few rotations. And then Emily V and I can maybe talk about how we, continue to be learners now that we're out of school, and we can answer any other questions that you guys have.
Yeah, I think P1 year. So in undergrad, I was the same way as Emily had kind of said. I just rewrote my notes on like blank sheets of paper in different colors, and that really worked for me. P1 year, I kind of followed through with that, and it went over all right. I think P2 years when I realized that number one, there was just not enough time to write all the information out, and number two, like your hand starts to hurt, you're using a lot of paper. It just wasn't as effective. So now I've kind of transitioned to now I type most of my notes, but I try not to just copy straight off the slide. I try to like summarize each slide into like the most important parts so that I'm trying to think through the note. And then I rewatch the lectures as I do it. So kind of again that listening and looking and summarizing. And it's gone all right so far.
That's good. I think around that time, I tried to start to make my own study guides as well. So putting together, just like you said, that concise information. And one thing I just thought of, which I never did, but maybe even taking that, to your professor and say, hey, am I highlighting all of the points that you also think is important? So not necessarily asking them like, hey, what's on the test, but am I getting, the concepts that you feel are important for me now and then moving forward? Because you will probably end up keeping those notes for a while too. So and then Noah, any advice for Emily as she's going through her P3 year, or what tidbits or tricks or things have you picked up as you've started your first few rotations?
Yeah, Emily, I feel like I run into you quite a bit, so feel free to like email me or whenever. Um, as far as P3 year goes, I felt like I really stepped up my game in academics as far as grades go by I started like reviewing the lecture notes before class. Like I'd get up really early and do this, and then I would go over them again and create that study guide like you do. Um, I think I started typing them out too, or I can't. And then, but yeah, I did. I started typing them out after class. And then for rotations, I would try to pick some in your interest area, like where you feel like you're going to end up. If you want to do administration, I think there's administration rotations at UIHC and elsewhere. If you want to do industry, you probably have to reach out to those companies and set them up. There's a process to set up rotations if you want to go somewhere specifically. I didn't do that, and that's one thing that probably could have helped me. Otherwise, like try to get a good mix too. Like right now on my rotation, we're focusing a lot on compounding in the hospital, which is really fun. That I didn't have any job experience doing. So like, yeah, trying to pick those interest areas you have, and you'll learn a lot. And like I bought the NAPLEX book. You can probably like go in with your classmates on that, or Fern, I'll give you a free copy of like last year's book. Um, and so I'll read a little bit out of that, like a chapter a day, maybe. And just finding time to study and like prioritize what you're doing, get your homework done, study a little bit, and then maybe do like you don't have to worry about residencies too much until like right now because they opened up November 1st and they're due January 1st. Yeah.
Thank you. And then Emily V, I guess, now that we've been out of school, how do you continue to, keep up with changes that are happening in the profession or in therapeutics? Or what advice would you have to continue that lifelong learning?
Yeah. I still maintain a day of practice in the community pharmacy, which it's amazing how quickly you lose your proficiency in your daily job when you're not doing it every day. So every Wednesday that I go in to work in the pharmacy, I'm like kind of relearning everything. And so just working every day has helped me. I get US pharmacist, which kind of keeps me, up to date on new drugs and things like that. I was going to say something else. Oh, I think, attending lectures and putting yourself in the student spot is really important too. I had a guest lecturer come in today for me in physiology. And so I sat, with the students, and I think, sitting in on someone else's lecture, whether it's continuing education or anything like that, really kind of changes your perspective on how you learn too. So that was an interesting experience for me today. So just a couple things I do to try to keep up.
Nice. Yeah, I try to stay up on literature too, which again is why I'm laughing at the biostats thing, because I did not enjoy it in school. And now I'm like, this is probably one of the most useful things that I could have learned. I have about like a 20-minute commute. So I'll try to listen to a podcast like Game Changers on CEI Impact or something like that, at least a couple of times a week, just because I'm already in the car. And even though I love my true crime, I got to break it up sometimes so I don't run out of episodes. And then at our job, we'll try to share like new literature and things like that. As a group, we all attend our student journal clubs as well. So asking them questions helps us. And sometimes we'll even ask our students like, hey, what are you guys learning? What's new now? To keep us up to date with things as well. So again, I think as you move into whatever field or specialty you have, of course, you'll gain more understanding and gain more interest in that. But just remember to kind of pick up on things from outside your field as well, just to make sure that you're staying well-rounded on what's going on in pharmacy and in the medical world. I think for time, I mean, we've got plenty of time. Do you guys have any other questions? Whether that's studying. Emily, I know you're about to pick rotations soon. Noah, you're in your rotations right now. So any questions for myself or Emily V?
Not necessarily a question, but we signed up for next semester's courses on Monday. So I signed up for drug literature, like number one, and I was thinking of dropping it, and I'm no longer going to. So thank you for that.
Do it.
Perfect
I
timing.
think it's the same thing. It's like it did not interest me at all, but knowing it'll be helpful, I will suffer through it. It'll be good.
And one thing I'll say too, I learned this pretty early. If you know the biostats and you can kind of throw out explanations like while you're doing your journal clubs, like, yes, and this number needed to treat means blah, blah, blah. Your preceptors will be very impressed because no one really likes it in school.
Cool. Perfect. Yeah, no, that's great to hear.
And yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter where you're working in pharmacy, whether you're community, hospital, industry, anything in between. There's always going to be new drugs, new studies. It's just a skill that you have to have. And, I'm working with physician assistants now, and they say the same thing. It's not just our profession. It's like, gosh, we wish we would have paid more attention to biostats, because now we're all, academic advisors for these capstone projects and things like that. And it's like, it's difficult if you don't have that proficiency and skill. So, yeah, you're going to be miles ahead by sticking with that. I think it might not be fun when you're doing it, but it'll definitely benefit you in the long run.
Yeah, I'll definitely have, physicians and medical residents call me and ask me about something I have not talked about in months or years. And I'm like, okay, like taking down that information. But because I know how to find the literature, I know how to analyze it, I know, the very basics, and then I bring them back the information about the question that they're asking. They have no clue that I didn't know what they were talking about 10 minutes ago. So I think it's a very important skill set that pharmacists especially are able to do well. So stick with it. Don't drop the class.
Perfect. I guess the only question, which I guess Noah might be able to answer as well, did you guys do anything to prepare for rotation? So, before they even started, or just kind of dive in and learn as much as you can while you were there?
Maybe about like a week to 2 weeks before, I would email the preceptor and just ask, what are common disease states we see? Is there anything in particular you think I would need to know? A lot of the time it might be a little bit more general, but you can also use that opportunity to kind of go through your, NAPLEX study materials and just start getting used to that. And then I think the first few days, just be honest and say, hey, what do I need to do or learn to be a successful student in this rotation. And so taking that little bit of initiative up front, it'll give you more opportunities to show them, yes, I'm being prepared. I want to be successful in this rotation, as well as obviously pass my boards.
Yeah, it's a long time ago. I don't really remember exactly what I did beforehand, but I think my one regret, or the one thing that I would change, again, I was pretty tunnel visioned on thinking that I'm going to do community pharmacy. I just kind of need to get through this year. I know I'm not going to do a residency. And so I think, in retrospect, I probably missed some good learning opportunities where I should have just been more present, for lack of a better word. Because there's lots of opportunities to learn on rotations besides just being there. You can identify things like, hey, can you tell me more about this? Or I'm really interested in this topic. And your preceptors are going to jump, hopefully, at the opportunity to teach you if you show extra interest. So take advantage of those things. Play the student card. Like, this is like a pretty risk-free learning environment, right? Like, you're not directly responsible for any patients. You're there to learn. So take advantage of that, because your first couple months in practice can be terrifying when it's just it's like, oh my gosh, they trust me to do this on my own. So definitely take advantage of being a student. Any opportunity to learn is a good one.
Yeah, one thing I tell my students now is, after we go through the syllabus and kind of schedule and what it will look like, if there are other things that you're interested in that still kind of fall within the rotation, but we might not have set up already, just let us know. I remember one of mine, it was a general hospital rotation because I wanted to be back in Des Moines. And so I just had one preceptor. It wasn't anything formal. And I said, hey, I haven't gotten any psych. And would it be okay if I met with a psych pharmacist or shadowed someone in the psych department? And so I got to do that. And I got to go see adolescent group sessions. And that wasn't on my syllabus or anything like that. So just letting them know I have a couple other interests. Would it be possible to shadow someone, even if they're not necessarily a pharmacist? I got to sit in the cath lab as well, and it wasn't a cardiac rotation. So just be honest with them and let them know what your interests are, because you can always find something that will help you regardless of what rotation it is and regardless of what you end up doing.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Any other questions?
Anything else for us today?
Well, thank you, Emily and Noah. It was very interactive, and hopefully you gained some insight. And certainly reach out to us if you have any questions. Noah, as you kind of transition into the next professional chapter, Emily, as you enter rotations. I know we've got a couple more SuccessRx series events that are scheduled, and I usually try to jump on the call if I can. So hopefully we'll see you at some of those. But we appreciate you logging on tonight. And Shayla, thank you. It was great working with you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you guys so much. And just like Emily said, if you have questions, feel free to always reach out.
Thank you very much.
And Kayla had to jump off, but she says goodbye and thank you for joining as well. So, all right. Thank you. You guys have a nice evening.
Thank you guys. Good night.
Take care.
Bye, guys.